Welcome to the Society Pod, a podcast for entrepreneurs, marketers, and leaders. Here's your host, Jessica Yarmy.
Hey there, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of the Society Pod. My guest this week is a marketing extraordinaire turned entrepreneur turned consultant turned driven, passionate individual who wants to bring awareness and passion into people's lives in a general way. I don't know if that's a fair introduction, but my guest today, welcome to the show, Kat Zander.
Thank you so much for having me. I love that. That's actually a unique way to introduce me, but I'm all for it.
How would you introduce yourself? I just glazed over a whole lot of things.
Yeah. So I guess just by way of background, I spent over 10 years in marketing leadership for medtech and pharmaceutical companies in the US, in Europe, in the UK. And then I've also spent a fair amount of time working in the hospitals as well. And so in the professional sense, I've spent a lot of time bringing healthcare technologies to the market that help improve patient outcomes. But then on the hospital side, I've worked with leadership in terms of how we care for people, how we connect with people, how we make people feel seen and understood, and what impact that has on people's health and people's lives. So in 2020, I kind of left the corporate world while, everything was blowing up and started my own consulting business. And I very much continue that work. But then I've also kind of started to dive into a little bit more personal writing. So I've had a passion for healthcare for quite a long time, but it was actually really driven by my own experience with the healthcare system. And that's really the premise and the launching pad for everything I'm doing now. When I was 27, I had a brain hemorrhage, and I wasn't supposed to survive. Obviously I did. But I was left paralyzed with significant cognitive challenges. So I had difficulty speaking, articulating thoughts and words. I couldn't add 2 + 2, all of those things. And it was a very long and difficult recovery process. What's been so interesting to me through this whole journey is the challenges that I faced weren't the hardest thing. It wasn't the physical challenges. It wasn't learning how to walk again. I mean, those are undeniably very difficult things to do. But it was that my place in the world changed. So people no longer saw me for who I am. People no longer understood me. And people no longer saw me for who I thought I was. So there was a gap in what I knew to be true about myself, but then what other people thought I was capable of. And so I've spent many years trying to fight those perceptions and really come a long way in terms of how I approach other people. So I know deeply what it's like to feel misunderstood, to feel not seen, to feel not heard. And so I carry that with me in every professional interaction I have, in, the business interactions I have, in my leadership roles as a mother, as a wife, and it really informs everything I stand for today.
And now I'm seeing where the purpose driven, the empatheticness, all of it is coming into the equation. Okay, so you started a newsletter called Become the Wild. Give me the premise of Become the Wild and what someone could expect if they signed up for your newsletter.
So it really stems from my own personal journey. So I spent so long trying to hide. I was afraid to truly be seen and known by the world because I felt misunderstood. I made more of an effort to hide, and I felt a lot of shame for what we can call the damaged parts of me, the limitations that people see, all of those kinds of things. And so I really had this me against the world mindset. My whole mission in life was to challenge expectations, to prove everyone wrong. And I was this lone wolf. And that got me, far, for sure. I think that lended itself well to a determination in my recovery and rehabilitation. But at some point along the way, I realized that I couldn't fight the world if I wanted to belong and really, truly connect with people. And there was a lot of things that happened to kind of lead up to that point. So Become the Wild represents a personal journey for me, stepping into the wild, stepping into the known. of being vulnerable, of sharing my story, of sharing my struggles, of really getting into the nitty gritty, kind of uncomfortable topics that are hard for me to talk about, really hard to put out there in the public after, hiding for so long and just keeping things really close to the chest. So it's really an exploration of what it means to be human, what it means to be afraid, to be uncertain, to fight through those things and come out on the other side.
That's brilliant. I feel like there's someone like you could tell you approach healing and development as a journey, and a true journey is never over. And so to share moments that are not complete moments, or you're not at a destination, but just to share from the place of where you are, stand where your feet are, and just open your heart up to where you are in that moment is really amazing.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting because through my writing, I have met some incredible people and built a community that I never had imagined. But the thing that's so interesting for me and such a profound lesson is, even though we all have different experiences, different lives, different challenges that we go through, we all share some of the same struggles and challenges, afraid to be seen and known, putting ourselves out there, being vulnerable, being judged, making mistakes, just not being uncertain about the future. All of these things are part of the human experience. So I certainly have had very different experiences than many people, but there's a lot to relate to if we're willing to show up and talk about the hard stuff and not pretend like everything's okay all the time.
I know you've been in your entrepreneur journey now for 4 years. I think one of the funny things that's happening in entrepreneurship is there's a lot of talk about the activities around entrepreneurship and the business building and the relationships, and there's less talk about the mindset of entrepreneurship or the struggles mentally through entrepreneurship. How do you dance between those two topics?
It has been a journey, I will say, and I don't love that word, but so in the early stages of entrepreneurship, there's a lot of fear and uncertainty and a lot of doubt. Can I do this? Oh my God. What if I fail? What if I can't put food on the table? All of those things. You continue through it. And I think now I'm at the point where two things are true. Number one, I've found my groove in that I am able to choose who I want to work with because they're aligned with my values. And I think there's multiple stages throughout the entrepreneurship path where you're, in scarcity, feast or famine mode. And then you become a little more mature in the process and you learn and you grow. And now I'm at a point where if something's not a fit, if someone's not aligned with, what do I want to accomplish in the world and my vision for how I want to contribute to the world, then I'm not going to work with them. But that takes a lot. Like, entrepreneurship is not an easy path. It's not for the faint of heart. And it is a very humbling experience. If you go into it thinking that you've got it all figured out, you don't. There's always bumps in the road. And, I'm 4 years into it. And I think that there will still be bumps in the road. I still struggle with doubt sometimes. Am I doing the right thing? Am I going to fail? Is this all going to blow up in my face? Can I do this work? And you also have to sell yourself a lot. So I've had to learn to be very comfortable in selling myself. So as a marketer, and I know you have a background in marketing too, we sell other people. We tell other people's stories. It's very far removed from ourselves. But now, as a business owner, I have to sell myself and who I am on a regular basis. And that is quite the experience to navigate if you're not used to it.
How have you worked on that? I'm terrible at selling myself, so I'm genuinely looking for tips here. How do you get over the hump of putting yourself out there and presenting yourself as an expert?
Yeah, I see. The way I look at it, I'm not the smartest one out there. I'm not the most successful. I don't have more marketing knowledge than someone else comparable. But what I do have is strong conviction in who I am and what I believe. And also, I think that I have a strong leadership methodology that I bring into my work. So, because I'm building strategies and working with teams, I often have to bring that into my work. So, I think what sets me apart is whenever I get on a call with somebody, I know what I believe and what I stand for and what I'm putting out into the world. And I feel like if they connect with that, if I don't say everything perfectly and I, make mistakes in, whatever it is that we're talking about, that ultimately doesn't matter because I've connected with them on a different level. And that's how I try to approach conversations, from a lens of connection rather than a lens of, I did this and I did this and these are my qualifications.
Well, and going back to what you were talking about with alignment, if you have a client list that aligns with your passions and aligns with your value system, you can come to conversations always with authenticity, and I would assume it flows better between client consultant, or client agency.
And honestly, like it's been a long time coming. I mean, I've been at this long enough to know what works and what doesn't, and I've certainly failed a lot. Right. I've certainly taken on clients that weren't a good fit. And I knew that, but I sort of ignored that voice in my head and that little, feeling. So I've made the mistakes and I've done everything wrong under the sun that you can imagine. And because of that, because I've had, I think, a willingness to be humble, a willingness to know that I don't know everything and that I always have an opportunity to learn and grow and get better. Because of that, I've been able to take those lessons and incorporate those into where I am today.
So if there's a new entrepreneur listening to this, what are some of the lessons you've learned from your 4 years in entrepreneurship so far?
Don't do it alone. So at the beginning, I was the lone wolf and I didn't think that um, I could count on anybody else. I still had that very kind of independent mindset. But even if you're starting a solopreneurship journey, you need people around you, even if it's just for support. I've become part of a community since, I guess, last year, and it's transformed so many things about how I operate in my business. And I think, honestly, that community is part of what gave me the confidence to start turning away business that didn't align with me, because of that support network, because of that ability to bounce ideas off people. So I think if you're starting out on your entrepreneurship journey, realizing that you need people around you to lean on, to support you, that's fundamental. But the other thing is, stay humble. I see a lot of people on X coming in hot, thinking they know everything, and we never know anything. When I was young, and I don't know if you can relate to this, I kind of thought, not directly, but like there's some sort of magical destination where you achieve a certain level and like everything. You have all the secrets. But there's never a time where you know everything. There's never a time where you don't experience self-doubt, where you don't struggle, where you don't make mistakes, where you don't have to learn a new lesson. This is the path of being human, whether you're in a 9 to 5 or whether you're starting a business. Everything is always going to be in a state of flux where, nothing goes perfectly. You have to, lean on others for support. You make mistakes, you have to learn from them, whatever it is, but just go in with the mindset of learning and serving your clients if that's what you're doing. I want to do the best for my clients because I believe in what they're doing. And I have a particular passion. My clients are mostly healthcare related, so I have a purpose behind that, that comes from a lot of experience, but it kind of matters. I don't look at my clients as transactions and as money on the table. I look at them as relationships that I have the opportunity to serve and help them grow too.
I love connecting with people like you who are entrepreneurs and also have a healthy view of entrepreneurship. If we use X as the example, that platform is so filled with people who have a get rich quick view of entrepreneurship, and it's about pulling value or pulling money from people instead of giving value to. That's part of why I try to do what I do, is just put out as much free learning as I can in so many different places, but it's hard to be as loud as those who are trying to make money because they're loud. And it's such a balancing act. Of almost part of my thought process is I just need to show up as me, and like will attract like, aligned will attract aligned. But then I definitely don't have as large of a platform as I wish I did to reach more people. So it's definitely an odd time to be an entrepreneur, because we're in an era of buy my course, buy my coaching hours, and so much of it is smoke and mirrors. And I I want to use Grace's word, I want to amplify the voices of those who are building it correctly, and building in a value first kind of way, a client first kind of way, a give before I take kind of way. And that is actually more rare than you would think that it would be.
For sure. And it is hard. Like, yeah, I mean, I don't have a massive following either, and I'm okay with that. But it is challenging to have your message heard and your voice heard with all the noise and all of the, buy my thing. This is, 5 steps to whatever success, whatever it is. If you lead with who you are and the impact that you want to have, that will always outlast the other voices. It's not a quick journey. It's certainly not an easy journey, but in the end, you will have more impact, even if it's on a smaller scale. If I reach one person or 10 people, that's enough for me. Now, there is a certain reality that we all have. We need to pay the bills and we need to make money. But I find that if you, at least in my experience, if you start aligning what you're doing with the impact you want to have, with who you are at your core, showing up as you are, the rest follows. It's not easy, it's not linear, it's not perfect, but it does follow, and it's a much more sustainable path, and it just makes you feel better. I mean, I feel good in the morning when I wake up and I'm doing things for impact rather than money.
I was listening to a Gary Vee episode recently, and he's talking about authenticity as being a long-term play, because those who are not authentic will always be exposed in the long term. And if you are authentic, and if you are building from a purpose, and building according to your values, that the long term will reveal you to be correct. Or and he obviously says it a whole lot more concisely than that, but when he said it gave me a little bit of peace, because I feel every day that I'm losing in the short term.
Yep.
And I think that's one of the hardest things of entrepreneurship, is just the daily feeling of loss, or the daily feeling of defeat, or the daily feeling of it's not enough yet, or I'm not doing enough, or the business isn't doing enough, or my presence online isn't enough. Like, there's always that feeling of like, this could be more, or this could be bigger. And it is that mental game of like, what is right now, and then what is 5 years from now, and connecting those two mindsets of, yes, I'm hungry now, and that is what will get me to the 5-year goals. Like, how do you juggle between short term and long term?
Entrepreneurship is an internal journey as much as an external journey. There's so much of it that is mental, and I struggle with the same thing. I mean, it's easy for me to sit here and say, you just need to have your vision in front of mind and know what you're creating in the world. But that doesn't prevent the doubt from creeping up. That doesn't prevent the comparison from happening. We all have comparative syndrome where we compare our journey to others. And I do the same thing. I've often felt over the last year with the writing that I've started to do that I'm behind everybody. People don't get what I'm doing, or I'm not resonating with people. And I think there is no easy answer to this. It is a constant daily battle, but if you can win the battle more than you lose the battle, then eventually you'll get where you want to go. I don't win the battle every day. Sometimes I lose to the doubt and to the fear, think about giving up, right? But I just try to win as many battles as I can.
I know you're big on resilience, and this kind of starts to go into like a resilience kind of topic, because it is just the ability to take a loss, get back up, start again the next day. And I do have days, or I have weeks sometimes, or even seasons where it just feels like, can I get a win? And talk to me about how you think about resilience, or how resilience has played a role for you in your career.
I go through that too. Days, weeks, seasons. I mean, I'm right there with you. And I think the idea that resilience is an all or nothing thing is flawed. So we can't push through obstacles every day. We're going to get tired. We're going to run out of steam. So there's periods of time, seasons of time where, I'm just kind of coasting and getting by and just surviving. And then there's seasons where I'm pushing the needle and making moves and advancing or, growing my business. And I think for me, how I look at resilience is it's not something that I'm going to wake up and have every single day. Sometimes I need to fight for it. I need to cultivate it. I need to remind myself of what I'm capable of where I've come from, everything I've accomplished. And sometimes it's just crawling my way out of the mud. And sometimes I've got a little tiny shovel, and sometimes I've got a big shovel. But what really gets me ultimately, I think, moving forward, even if some days I'm not moving forward and I'm just kind of surviving in the mud, is that I think for me it's about hope. And I know that hope is something that I think is misunderstood a lot, because I see people on X in particular thinking about hope as wishful thinking. And that's not how I look at it. It's not wishful thinking. Hope doesn't mean that you don't have to put in the work. Hope doesn't mean that you just make a wish and send it out into the universe and it's going to happen. That's not hope. What hope is the belief that things can get better, the belief that you can overcome a current challenge or obstacle. It's the belief that you have the capacity to try and fail and pick yourself back up again. It's the belief in you and who you are and what you have to give in the world. That's what I think hope is. And I think that drives a lot of what I do and what I've done.
So how do you get to that, Kat? What do you do when you're in the mud, when you have those days and you're in the mud and you are trying to bring hope into your world? Like, how do you do it? Like, how do you flip your mindset?
Yeah, I probably have an advantage in this one over most people, because I have a journal that I kept in the hospital when I was recovering from the brain hemorrhage, and I lost the ability to use my right hand. I had to relearn how to write with my left hand, so it's very scribbly and scratchy. And I can read that journal and read about milestones. Like, I moved my thumb for the first time, or I took my first step today, or I had a shower by myself today. And so I have this bank in the back of my head of all of the really hard things that I've done and persevered through and gotten over. And so when I'm struggling, when I'm in the mud, when I'm trying to dig myself out of it, I can go back on those experiences and see what I've already done. But here's another way I look at it. So I have two girls, and what my husband and I are really trying to cultivate in them is this mindset of resilience as well. And how we do that, I'll give you an example. So our youngest daughter came to me a few months ago, and she was going to talk to her teacher about something, but she was scared and she didn't think she could do it. But my husband and I are not those parents who are indulgent. And if our kids don't want to do something and they're scared of doing something, we say, okay, it's okay, honey, you don't have to do it. So we make them do a lot of things that they're scared of because we know what's on the other side. They don't. And so eventually they persevere, they overcome, they push past their fear, and they do the thing, whether it's mountain biking or swimming or, anything like that. And so I just said to her, well, do you remember when you did this? Remember how scared you were? Do you remember what happened? You were scared and you did the thing anyways. And what happened? And now you love it. And then I just listed experience after experience after experience of her pushing past her fear, doing whatever it was that scared her, and figuring out how to do it. So I said, you can do this. You already know how to push past fear. So all you have to do is call those experiences up when you're standing in front of your teacher and you're going to talk to her, and just know, I can do this. I do this all the time, right? And so that's kind of how I look at it as well.
Do you still journal today?
Inconsistently, I would say. I kind of like ebb and flow. I get really excited. I buy a new journal, and then, a couple of weeks later, I stop.
As you're talking, I'm almost like giving myself a homework assignment, because I will most often write when I'm in the mud. And as you're talking, I'm kind of thinking I should write when I'm in a proven, resilient, I just succeeded place. So then I have that to come back to or reflect on, instead of reflecting on the mud.
Yeah. If we only reflect on the mud, that has an impact on, what we believe about ourselves and our capacity to rise above. There's one other thing that I do that I think really helps me in times where I'm in the mud. So I have this document, and it's just a one pager that talks about my husband and each of my daughters individually and my clients, and what each of them need from me and how they need me to show up for them so that they can achieve their highest potential. So it's that serving mindset again. So I know when I'm struggling and I can't give everybody the best that I have to give, I read through that document, and it just allows me that ability to separate what I'm going through to the ability to show up in some of those smaller moments. And it's not perfect, but again, having that larger sort of idea of who you want to be in the world. And you said like showing up as yourself. Those are things that help me show up as myself, even when I'm struggling.
Yeah, I feel like an obligation to share from the mud, because I think in a way my twisted entrepreneur mindset is there's always mud. I am there and have always been there, regardless of what I've achieved. Even on a look back, I'm like, it could have been better. It could have been better. And so like, if I have a mindset of, I'm going to wait until it's, perfect, or I'm not going to share anything. So I have to have confidence and give myself permission to just be where I am. And then also still acknowledge that I still have something of value to share, to give, whether it's to employees or whether it's just to people out in the world. All of that is still useful and still valid, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And I think that's there's a couple of things. When we think that starting our own business is the easier path than a 9 to 5, that is, from anyone, anyone who's actually done it, that is not the case. But the other thing is business is human. We connect with other human beings because of their imperfections, because of who they are, not because they're perfect and they know everything. And that doesn't build connection and relationships. This idea, and I've fallen into this trap as well for many, many years. When I was hiding, I was afraid to share the hard stories and the vulnerable stories and the mistakes. When we're afraid to share our truth and what really matters, what we do is we create an environment for the people behind us to not feel like their struggles are normal, to
Mm.
have shame for some of the things and struggles that they're going through and some of the challenges. When we make ourselves appear that we have everything together and that everything's wonderful and we never make mistakes, we're never in the mud, then the people behind us who we have an opportunity to lead and help and share our own stories, they don't see the reality and they think something's wrong with them. They internalize their mistakes and think, well, Jessica doesn't make mistakes, so I guess I must be doing something wrong. And that's just not the case. No matter if we're 20 or 40 or 60, we're going to make mistakes. We're going to doubt ourselves. We're going to have fear. We're going to have anxiety. We're going to be in the mud. And that's the human journey. That's what it is to be human. And that never stops.
I think that's a perfect transition to where I wanted to go next, because I wanted to specifically talk with you about being a woman in business.
Mhm.
And you and I are both in our 40s. And so we grew up in a time, business wise, where you did have to filter, or it was a filtered environment or story that you had to tell as being a woman in business. I posted recently that like I used to downplay being a mom because like having kids and having a personal life was a vulnerability from a professional perspective. So talk to me about your journey as a woman through the business world.
Oh, I came from a very male dominated industry. So pharmaceuticals in particular, before things are changing now, but I worked with mostly men. And you're right. Talk about being a mom, talking about having other priorities outside of work was not well received. And so there was this sort of hiding and there was a lot of filtering. And I remember I was in Europe for a conference and I was trying to connect with all of these, older white men, and they all drank scotch. And so I thought, okay, well, I'm going to start to drink scotch. So again, and I did. And then all of a sudden they took me seriously because we had something in common to speak about. But that was very much me trying to mold myself into their world, to make myself like them. And so obviously I've grown, changed over the decade and through experience. And now as I've started to work with more women-led companies, I've started to understand the fundamental difference in how we lead. And so
Mm.
women, when as leaders who are given the space to be who they are, to not have to hide parts of themselves, to live up to the full wholeness of everything that they have in their lives, the multifaceted people they are, that's where they thrive. And so as a leader now, what I try to impart on the people that I'm guiding is that it's okay to be who you are. And if that isn't okay with someone, then you're not in the right place. And I know that's a very privileged perspective to come from. You can't just say, well, my leader doesn't appreciate who I am, so I'm just going to quit. And that's not necessarily the reality for most people. But I think if people like me and like you and like Grace, if we can start shifting the narrative about what it takes to be successful in leadership and companies and business, then the people behind us will hopefully benefit from that change as well and continue it on. I'm really interested in helping. What I see with young women is a fear of speaking up. It is a fear of making their voices heard, a fear of not being seen as credible. And the thing is, they have all the knowledge, they have the skills, they have the capacity. What they don't have and haven't historically haven't had is people who give them the space to do so and people who believe in them. And so that's what I try to do as a leader.
That is spot on. Within my team, the thing I find myself saying more than anything is, you are there. Don't wait until you get farther along. You are there. Be where you are. You're accomplished. You have done the things. It is like an imposter syndrome that I think is like freezing maybe the younger generation. I know it certainly froze me for a long time in my career. I really didn't lean into content until I had a title to back up my content. And now I have no title. I give myself whatever title I want. And there's a certain freedom to that. But I keep on trying to pull my team along with me. Like, you have to start to speak, because the way you find your voice is by talking. I'm now 7 years into my content game, and I'm not a content creator by any means, but like into the content that I create and post.
Yeah.
And even across those 7 years, I'm so much better now than I was, but then I also still have more to do. And so I just keep on trying to tell them, like, start as early as you can with just sharing where you are, and it doesn't have to be perfect, and you have something important to say, even if it comes from an incomplete place or an inexperienced place or a place of vulnerability. Like, that is all not only acceptable, but it's encouraged.
We need to feel like it's okay to stay up, to take up space. Like our voice matters because it does. And I think that's one of the things where I've certainly struggled with, especially in my younger years in business world, was being taken seriously. And so I remember getting a raise, and they didn't give me any extra compensation for it. And I thought, well, but no, I'm getting this new title. And, blah, blah, blah. And my boyfriend at the time, he was like, what are you talking about? Like, no, you deserve a raise, and this
Yeah.
title change is nonsense, right? But it didn't occur to me. I was coming from this place of trying to climb and being grateful that I was given this sort of status or opportunity without valuing what I was actually bringing to the table. And I think that that is much more common with what I see in women than men. And I think it's shifting, changing, but I think the responsibility for people like us is to really nurture that and to really help guide the next generation so that they don't to wait so long
Yeah.
to kind of learn some of these lessons, because we're just as valuable. We deserve just as much space, and we deserve our voices to be heard just as much as men. But the fact that we don't amplify women in the same way that we do men, the fact that we don't invest in women-led businesses in the way we do male-led businesses, the fact that there's still a disparity in compensation between men and women. I mean, this stuff is really hard systemic stuff that we're not going to change overnight, but I think we just keep
Yeah.
tackling these things one step at a time, right?
The statistic is around 2% of venture capital funding goes to women. And as frustrating as that is, the answer is not to sit the game out.
No.
The answer is to stay in the game, stay on the field, be louder, amplify more, find the others, like find the people that you're aligned with, and make it better for the next generation. Even
Yeah.
if that means going from 2 to 4. I think that's the kind of baby step progress that we're all waiting for and looking for. And then simultaneously, we feel like we make progress, and then we feel like also we get hit 40 years into the past. So we are just like 3 days off of Harrison Butker's like commencement speech, and I'm sure you saw it online where he's just making comments about, like, as much as your degree and your career is important and you're probably excited about it, you're probably more excited about motherhood and wifehood. What were your thoughts when you heard that commencement speech?
Aside from being infuriated, I mean, it's really difficult as the mom of two girls to kind of help them navigate the world and understand themselves in this world that continues to tell them that their value is in their looks, how they take care and support men, wife, mother, whatever. And I am a mom, but I will tell you, that is not all I am. I am much more than that. And I take my role seriously and I love my kids, but I have so much more to contribute to the world than just being a mom. Like that's one of the things I do. And so to hear someone who's in a place of, I guess, leadership or prominence, espouse those beliefs, I think there's a couple of things. I think we're never going to stamp out those opinions 100%. I think those people, those opinions, those beliefs are always going to be there. But what does give me hope is the swift reaction. I think that gives me hope. No one stayed silent. The controversy was swift, it was quick, and it's all over the place now. And I think that's the best that we can do is speak up against this and tell girls that no, your value in life is not to support men, to be a mother, to be a wife. That is your contribution, whatever you want to do in the world is whatever you want to do. It's not those predefined roles. Like we're not going back to 1902 or whatever. But I think it as difficult and infuriating as the message was, I am hopeful because there was such a quick response across the board from people who said, no, this is not acceptable. We are not standing for this.
I 100% agree. I was disappointed that in the moment as he was speaking that there weren't boos going on, but the boos after the fact and the social riptide that's happening right now shows him and shows others that if they're going to lean on their freedom of speech, their freedom of having opinions, you also have freedom of receiving the consequences of saying things that are just totally backwards in time. Like if you're going to speak from the 1950s, you're going to receive a backlash from an entire gender that's going to do their best to cancel you, to embarrass you, to bring up flaws from your past, and will make efforts to make your future as difficult as possible. You kind of want to have the thought of like when they go low, we go high. But in the internet era, when they go low, everyone goes lower. And the amount of content that is surrounding his conversation starter, the conversation has now evolved in ways that are very detrimental to him, to his career. Yeah. And I think, that's where we are as a society. It's not the 1950s where something could be said and there wouldn't be a loud response. There would be a whispered response. We're in an era of loud vocal responses, and I'm not mad at it. I'm not mad at it at all. And I don't have daughters myself, but if I did, I would shine the spotlight on the response, because if someone is in their circle and throws shade at them in that same way, like, look, there are others that are aligned with you. There are others that have your back. There are others that see your potential and see your value and will support you in achieving whatever you want to achieve in life. And I think that's the only silver lining of what's been happening in the past 3 days.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and that's the thing. I mean, it's easy. I could get stuck in that narrative and just use it as an excuse to think that the world is terrible and everything. But I think finding those opportunities to see the progress and the good in it, I think is probably a more helpful direction. It doesn't take away what he said. And I have so much, I don't even know what the word is, but I feel for those women who just graduated and they had this huge accomplishment that they achieved, and they were minimized and reduced to wives and mothers. And I also want to say, like, I don't want to reduce that as well, or minimize that as well. For women who choose to be wives and mothers and homemakers, that's incredible as well. But the point is that it's your choice.
Right.
It's not a choice that's defined by your gender. And one of the things that I think with these angry feminist tropes that we see is we're attacking the messenger and not the systemic barriers that women face. We're making characters out of the women who are angry and speaking up for what they see as injustices in the world and what they see as, wrong. And we're criticizing them instead of really looking at ourselves and how we're actually reinforcing those stereotypes, reinforcing those systemic issues, reinforcing the things that are happening. So that's one of the things when, so a situation like this, people are angry and they have every right to be angry because this isn't just one person that's saying this. This isn't just one time. This is
Yeah.
decades and decades and decades, our entire history of dealing with stuff like this. So of course we're angry, and that's okay.
We could talk about this all day long, clearly. But I want to provide some value to the working moms because you're obviously an accomplished, successful working mom and now successful mompreneur or entrepreneur who's also a mom. So give me your thoughts on working mom life.
It's a little bit of a struggle sometimes, I will say. So my kids are older now, 9 and 13. But when I started this, they were 5 and 9. And I struggled a lot with mom guilt when I was working on my business, doing extra things, because when you're starting out, there is definitely a different level of work and commitment required. There's a lot of work that you're not getting paid for, like invoicing and all of that kind of stuff. And so I did struggle with guilt when I was taking time away from my kids to focus on my business. So that is one challenge. I don't know if I don't, to people who are doing it with younger kids, oh my God, I have so much admiration for you. Like, I honestly don't know how you do it, but I think the secret for me is setting boundaries. So one of the things that I think many people can relate to now with a lot of us who are working from home is that separation between work and home life has blurred. And if I found if I didn't set those time boundaries, I could work 7 days a week, 12 hours a day, and it just never stops. All I have to do is walk down the hall to my office and turn on my computer. But I started to set boundaries on my time. And so when I'm working, but when I'm not, I'm not. And that gives me the space and time to give my girls what they need and to give them the time that they need, focus time where it's only about them and the rest of the stuff can wait. Now, it's not that I've done that perfectly. It's not that that hasn't been a process of growth and a learning process throughout the evolution of my business. But I would say to the moms out there who are struggling with balancing kids and time and all of the emotions and stress that goes along with that is that at the end of the day, what you're building and what you're trying to create is probably connected to your kids and your family and what you want to do for them or what you want to create in the world. So just set some tiny boundaries, even if it's just, you know what, I'm not going to work on Sunday afternoons. It doesn't have to be big. Even if it's I'm not going to work during dinner, or I'm going to put my phone away during dinner, or I'm not going to answer calls during dinner, or just small things. And you'll find that if you start doing some small things, then it's easier to snowball and have that grow over time. So that's kind of where I started. I started small, setting those boundaries because obviously my kids are young and they need someone who's there and engaged and who cares about their needs. And if I'm starting this and I'm not meeting their needs and what they need from me, then like what am I doing? Like what's the point? Right?
Yeah.
So I would just say the guilt is always going to be there. It's never going to go away. The struggle between balancing what you need to do as an entrepreneur and what you need to do as mom is never going to go away. But if you can just set some boundaries and just recognize that these struggles are always going to be there, then I think it just makes it a little bit easier to do it day by day.
Yeah. There's never fully work life balance at all.
No,
It's a myth.
not even for people who like work a 9 to 5 or a corporate job. I
Yeah.
mean, my husband, he leaves the house at 6 a.m. every day, and he's probably home around like 4 or 5 o'clock. But he has like there's no work-life balance for him either, because we have more of a culture, at least in a lot of industries, where we're expected to be on all the time. We're expected to be responsive to emails and text messages and all of that kind of stuff. And
Yeah.
so I would just tell everybody setting boundaries is okay. And I think it's necessary, just to like try to mitigate burnout and just exhaustion.
I spoke recently to one of my friends who has a 13-year-old boy, and my boy is 13, and he's now at an age where he can participate in my business, which is
Oh,
interesting because I've had a similar approach as you, where either I am in work mode or I'm in mom mode.
yeah.
And now I have these beautiful blended moments where I'm doing both, and I love it because it's like the best form of multitasking, right? And then I'm also his first boss, and I'm also showing him like, here's how to run business, here's how to be an entrepreneur, here's how to go for what you want and what you believe in. I think your daughter is like right at that cusp where it's like, okay, get her in on your content game.
Yeah. I love that so much because, like, not only is it an opportunity for you to connect with your son in a different way, but it's also helping him learn and understand business and all of those things. And I think for me, especially as the mom of girls, and I think this like lends to all parents, but one of the things that I think is my highest aspiration and highest goal in life is to give them opportunities to figure out who they are and what they want out of life. And so giving them these experiences to work with you, that's just a learning opportunity for him to see, like, what do I like? What do I not like? What can I learn? And
Yep.
I think that to me, that's amazing. I would love to do that.
Either you hire your daughter or you can send her over to my internship program, because I'm I'm taking all of the young talent that I can because I believe in them, and I know they are so much more digital and tech savvy than I am. So that is my play for how I'm going to win in 5 years, is just to have all of the youth on my side. We covered a ton of ground. Is there anything that you have on your mind that we didn't talk about?
Yes, there is one thing. So one of the things that I see online in particular, and I think in business world, in entrepreneurship, is we've kind of co-opted vulnerability, authenticity, empathy, and some of these have become buzzwords and they've lost their meaning for what they actually are. And empathy is one of those things where I think we very often misunderstand what it is. So we've all heard the term put yourself in someone else's shoes. But I actually think that's fundamentally flawed, because if we put ourselves in someone else's shoes, we're still projecting our own thoughts, feelings, beliefs, experiences onto their experience. And the way I look at empathy is it's more about taking your shoes off. There's a principle called the blank slate, and it's something that's used in healthcare a lot. And it's the idea of trying as best as you can to clear your mind of your own beliefs, your own experiences, how you would react in a particular situation, and really lean in and try to understand the other person. That's one thing that I think that we're missing a lot online right now, is the capacity and willingness to understand other people and meet them where they are. So when I shared my story at the beginning, inevitably people are going to listen to my story and think about how they might react to that, how they might feel in that situation. But that's actually not empathy. That's projecting. Empathy is, okay, well, what did that mean for you? How did you feel? What did that do to your life? What was the biggest challenge? Right? It's digging in and challenging our assumptions about what we think other people feel, what we think other people think, and I think if I can do one thing in the world, it would be to create more understanding between people, and create a willingness to let go of ourselves and really try to meet other people where they are, other people who have different experiences than us, other people who have different lives than us, other people from different cultures, different races, different economic status. If we can try to understand people a little bit better, and I know that's very naive and lofty goal to have, but all we have to do is have a curiosity about people. Why did they do that? Why did they say that? Why did they react like that? And we'll be much further ahead, at least in understanding other people. And I would really love if we stopped with the cheap platitudes online and started to just have some real conversations.
I love that. I think it's a great way to wrap up this conversation because you clearly lead with empathy and act with empathy. It's not just a word for you, it's clearly how you do business, it's clearly how you do life. Empathy is an action, it's not a word for you. So I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. And thank you in general for being on today's episode of the Society Pod.
This has been so fun. Thank you so much, Jessica.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Society Pod.